for KPMG, where we're spending all our time at home and working with our clients and doing our engagements from home. So it's been it's been quite a tricky 4 weeks. So we've been working from home for the last 4 weeks at KPMG. You've probably seen in the news as well. Last week we had to make some tough announcements where we had to make a few people redundant and working with our clients and doing our engagements from home. So it's been quite a tricky 4 weeks. So we've been what's going on there?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That's my fault. I had the streaming up on another screen, and so it started. The look in your face was priceless. You're like, am I going crazy? Like, what's going on here?
That's so weird hearing your own voice. You always sound so shit when you hear your own voice. So, yeah, look, I'll try to continue on the back of that. So we actually had to make some tough announcements last week and made a few people redundant, not specifically in my team, but more broadly across KPMG. And we also had to take a 20% pay cut over the next 4 months. But besides that, it's been tricky leading a large team as well. We've had to make some just trying to engage with my team, and just coming up with like little strategies how to get them more engaged. Like doing some virtual drinks, virtual trivia nights. Just simple things like switching our conference calls, which we never really had our video on, which was rare for me coming into KPMG, coming from industry where we always used to have our videos on, and there was like a lot more video engagement. But we made a conscious decision across Australia, KPMG, and also globally to always turn our video on to make it more personal. And also, just for me, just checking in with my team and staff just to ensure that they're okay and coping all right. I think that the hardest thing for me working from home is just getting into a routine. I feel like I'm doing a lot more meetings these days, and I'm working longer hours. Maybe it's just because I'm just not conscious of the time. So I think I don't know what you guys are doing or thinking, but I feel like I'm working a lot more and just in a lot more meetings. And I think there's a few kind of things that that I think are really important while you're working from home, and it's simple things like you just have to get the basics right, like just setting yourself up in a comfy space, with some good lighting. You got room for your monitors to actually do your work. Just staying healthy and mentally healthy by doing exercise, taking breaks, going for walks, not just physically, but also mentally healthy. So, just making a conscious effort to start reaching out to people that stimulate you mentally and having regular conversations with them. I think that's helped me. I think you consciously need to start thinking about not falling into bad habits, like drinking scotch at 3 o'clock in the afternoon or
it's like a lot of people share that kind of, it's like this weird kind of transition into a different kind of environment where you're in the same place all the time. It's a strange thing to kind of get used to.
Yeah, so you don't want to be falling to bad habits like drinking all the time, eating crappy food, not doing exercise, drinking a lot of alcohol, working really late, which I'm starting to make a conscious effort to, switch my laptop off like at a certain time and then go for a run. And again, just keeping the communication lines open with your team, with my clients, with my key stakeholders, just checking in with them and making sure that these things are just okay with them. So like they're unprecedented times at the moment, but I think you can take some positives out of it. So all in all, it hasn't been too bad.
Yeah, cool. Okay, we'll keep moving through and we'll come back to some of the I've just made some notes, some of the things that you said. Justin, so I'll just pop you up on the screen.
Hey, Justin.
Nice to have you here with us, mate. So just a quick intro for you. So Justin, and for everybody else, sorry. Justin is the co-founder of a company called 80/20 Solutions. 80/20 Solutions is a modern workplace transformation company specializing in Microsoft systems integration. Justin has a background in running large-scale transformation programs for enterprise organizations. Nice to have you here, mate. So what do you got in your hand? What did you drink this evening?
Tasmanian Pinot I have in my hand.
Very nice.
Got to keep it nice and light. Pre-7 o'clock. So
very nice.
Very nice. Yeah.
How's the last few weeks been operating from home?
I was a little late to the work from home compared to others. We, obviously people went in stages. One of the things we do, we do a lot of work for a banking client, and when the Indian call centers went down or were forced to work from home and there was an impact, we stood up a pop-up equivalent in Sydney. So we had a little bit longer of me sort of going to the office, although it was a fairly empty city. I think the city was the best place to self-isolate for a while. It was dead. So I'm kind of in week 2 for full lockdown for me. I think it's a really interesting question. You can answer it one of sort of a few ways. I think the broader, I know we're here to chat about Corona, but I think the broader impacts on people probably took the first 2 weeks. I think getting productive and getting people mentally okay with what was going on, whether it's job security, etc. I think in our IT industry, everyone's fairly familiar that the area of technology we focused on is end user computing, so think laptops and email and that sort of stuff. So being able to get people up and running from home is kind of the thing right now, and we're in that space. So we've got a level of protection there, but our people aren't immune to the things around them. So I think the first week or 2 was actually spent checking in on everyone. I think there's been a bunch really, if I look at myself personally, I'm spending much more time able to do the strategy components. I think if I go to work with a to-do list of 5 things, the ad hoc meetings, the ad hoc coffees, the pull from pillar to post occupies too much of the day.
Yeah.
Now the meetings are much more opt-in now, and you meet when you want to meet and when there's an outcome that needs to be solved. And given we're in execution mode, it might be not great for creative type stuff, but right now in execution mode, I think it's giving us some advantages. We have our structure, we jump into virtual meetings when we need to, and we jump back out when we don't. So I feel there's some strong advantages to productivity in that space.
Yeah, definitely.
So interesting. I think you can look at it 50 different ways, but for me, I'm getting more time to strategize, more time to focus on where we want to be, probably less time to have the one-on-one conversations and those sorts of influences. The balance at the moment is probably a positive, I think, for productivity.
Yeah, and have you found you're working later and things like that as well?
I'm not so sure. I think a lot of people are saying they're working longer hours because they wake up at 7 and therefore they're working at maybe 10 times.
Yeah.
But I never loved the process of getting ready and going into the city, right? So for me, if I'm spending that extra hour either side working, I can kind of consider it the same. I think it's probably slightly longer hours working, but my days aren't elongating into the night. I'm not struggling with that.
Okay. And would you say that you typically have a pretty healthy work-life balance anyway?
No.
Okay.
No. So there is obviously degrees there of why the days haven't got longer. They didn't have much longer to get. I feel they're actually less stressful in some ways, in terms of I'm having my morning meetings on a walk with my parents' dog, which I've stolen for a couple of weeks. So in some ways, there's an element of, I think you just lose time in the office, don't you? With coffees that you don't really need to have, or they go longer than they should. Meetings you should decline, but don't. I actually think there's more times. So even if it's the same 10, 11 hours, it feels more restful than 10, 11 hours.
I agree. I mean, I've experienced the same thing. We'll keep moving, and then we'll do a bit of we've got Rach to go. I'll just pin you up, Rach. So Rachel Atkins is a self-confessed people geek with an entrepreneurial flair, who is passionate about developing the current workforce to manage and lead successful organizations in the digital economy. She's also the co-founder of it's a company called This Thing of Ours, who is an organizational design outfit specializing in innovation, design, and customer experience. And her choice of drink tonight is...
I'll show you the bottle. It's
It's a very fancy bottle.
Isn't it? That's why I chose it. I'm all about fancy bottles and branding.
Yeah.
As long as it looks nice, I'll buy it. No, it's actually, that's not true. It was on offer.
So how how's your experience working from home, Reg?
Amazing, absolutely amazing. Like,
so you're quite like an extroverted person who, you know, it really enjoys being around people. What's it been like, kind of, you know, trapped inside
the house and looking at a screen?
Yeah.
It's actually been more exhausting. Like, I think I was talking to somebody yesterday, and I was like, where did you go?
I'm trying to just turn it up.
Is it me? Do I need to do something? I'm a total tech, like, I'm not a tech geek at all. I'm like the opposite. Like, I don't understand technology. That's why I work with Chris and Phil. It's hilarious most of the time. No, I mean, I am actually exhausted. I was in bed for 8:30 last night, which never happens, because I think I've been on video conferencing non-stop for about 2.5 weeks, and it's totally different. Like, the energy that you pick up when you're meeting somebody in person and the energy you exude is totally different from sitting in front of a screen. I mean, I've been talking to you, Jason, for the last 3 weeks, and all I've talked to you is your head and shoulders. And and I've seen Chris and Phil in the same, and Luke and Mike. Like, so it's just, yeah, there's a different type of energy. I mean, I am exhausted. I have not talked this much. Justin, you can understand it. I have not talked as much as I have done in the last 2 weeks. It's ridiculous. So, but the energy's different. It's just really different. Like, I'm loving just being at, like, in the mornings, just going out and going for a walk. And today it was really weird because I had to meet Phil, because you know this posh microphone that I've got on my lapel. Like, Phil gave me this for tonight, like as an extra, like as a gift. So we met on Missenden Road, you know, near the hospital in Newtown. So we met there, and he handed me this plastic bag, and we were like, "Oh my god, I feel like we're handing over something that's like illegal that we shouldn't," because we sort of like handed it. I got my wipes out and wiped it down just in case. When I was like walking down the street with his microphone. And I was like, actually, it was really nice to see him in person. It was like meeting a celebrity. You know, when you see a celebrity on the screen and then you see them again in real life. I was like, oh, you exist. This is amazing. So yeah, it's been good for me, but also really.
So do you typically, you know, get energy from speaking, like being in, you know, close proximity with people and interacting with people? Like, do you kind of?
Yeah, I mean.
So have you found, like, being behind a screen, that is still there, or?
It's a lot, but I think there's a whole piece at the minute around, like, people are listening more, but people are listening differently. So even in this call that we're having now, everybody's like tuned in to what each other's saying, because they're like, just in case, you know, Jason decides to go, Joe, what do you think? Joe's like, oh, I need to, like, lean in, and I need to be. So we're all tuned in really differently, and actually the energy that we're using is really, really different to how we are. Just, you know, if we were all in a room, the senses that we're tuning into would actually be quite different to they are now. So even as an extrovert, I just want to, you know, after this call, I'm just going to go and lie down in a dark room and, like, meditate.
Yeah. Okay, well, it's awesome to have you on here, Rach, and it's been a real joy working with you and Chris and Phil over the last couple of weeks. So I'll just do, you know, I guess, like, kind of introduce what we're, you know, tonight, and what we're going to be chatting about, and why, and things like that. So it's obviously about working from home. and looking at the impact that is having in the way that we work and live. And so things that, you know, we might be interesting to talk about tonight are work-life balance from an experiential level, and then also from an organizational level, because we're either employed or we're running businesses. And so as an organization, we need to be engaging people to work, but organizations are used to be engaging people in a particular way for the last couple of 100 years, or not even. And now that's really changed. And what is interesting about it is that people, you know, for years have been like, oh, you know, can I just work from home? Or, you know, like Joe, I want to, you know, I'm having a family, and you know, I want to be able to do both. And traditionally, yeah, that's kind of starting to change. But traditionally, that was never an option. It was very like, you know, Industrial Revolution. You just clock off, you know, clock on, you clock off, 9 till 5, and you're not doing anything unless you're sitting in your seat. And there's always been this growing demand of people wanting to work from home. And now, but organizations have been like, oh, I'm not so sure because I can't see you and I don't know if you're being productive or doing anything at all. But now they have no choice. So there's this weird kind of situation where people are getting what they want, but is it working? And now that they've got it, do they actually want it? So I just want to open it up for just general conversation now around any thoughts around that. Anybody just unmute and maybe put I can't see everyone yet, sorry. Want to put your hand up? Go for it, Joe.
One of the things that I've thought for a very long time is that the option to work from home has always been there, more so than what people thought, particularly because I've always done it throughout my entire career. And when I first asked to work from home, it was in a very, very male-dominated environment. It was a truck and tyre industry. And they had never had anyone ask to work from home before at all. And I think I was too naive to realise that I probably shouldn't have asked for home, that it wasn't the done thing. So I just went in there and did it. And I knew exactly how I wanted to make it work. So I was so focused, so driven with it. And I think I don't know. I don't even know how, looking back, that I think I was so confident in myself and what I was able to do, and so naive in the fact that it just had never been done before, that I made it work. And I've always looked at people and thought you could actually work from home more if you wanted to. It's just that people get very comfortable in a situation, and probably some of it is that fear of failure, so they don't try to do things differently. And this has absolutely forced everyone to say, you can't go into the office, you have to work from home. So I think this has just brought to life some things that have always been an option for people. And it's about how do we learn from this so that people can have that sense of bravery and that sense of focus and that sense of empowerment, so that they can take these types of opportunities in other ways rather than waiting for a crisis or a pandemic to change.
So what is, you know, what do you see as empowering about that? Initially, you know, yeah. Like from working from home, and, yeah.
For me, it was the ability to focus in on what are the things that I need to do as a role, the things that I can still add value in even though I won't be in the office. The ability for me to just influence the managers in the area, all of that comes into that sense of personal control and personal empowerment, because I felt like I was able to be in charge of my own situation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it's like, I guess that's a good, you know, that plays into finding a real true balance between life and work, right? So where you're empowered in both because it's a choice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can anybody else relate to that? And you know that, yeah, Nikki. Yeah.
It really hit when you said that, Joe, because this isn't working from home, but originally when we were first married and I was working as a physio, and I didn't, for a whole lot of reasons, want to work full time because of distance and family. And it was, and it seems so archaic when I say it, but it was the first part-time allied health position in the state in Queensland when I started working part-time out here. And I think it came from that conscious choice that, you know, I do want to work. I love what I do, but I also want to be a good, you know, I want to be a mother, and I wanted to be, you know, involved in things out here. And I think it's so true what Joe was saying, that we often don't realise that we can ask for things because we get stuck in the system. And I've been saying for ages, since I've been in the coaching space, that and there's so much good research that's come out of Harvard and different areas. You know, Frederick Laloux's book around reinventing organisations and everyone culture, that people, if there's a good container for them, can actually work really well and more effectively from home because they do have that sense of autonomy and choice. Rather than that, you know, we've still been stuck in this industrial model where everyone's treated like a unit of capacity and and so they leave half themselves at the door and or spend a lot of time trying to cover up for insecurities they have, and that wastes so much time and energy, and it's sad. It's really sad.
Yeah, it's like it kind of representing like a shift in. I mean, it could even, like, this whole kind of change that we're seeing, it could even, you know, like it's a breaking of the systematic way things have been done from, you know, from the Industrial Revolution and the way these kinds of big organizations were established. And now they're having to like do this like humongous change. I'd be interested to actually hear from Dave or Justin around, you know, what kind of, you know, because you guys are seeing, actually, you know, and or anyone here really, the change that those organizations are facing, especially really like big old businesses that are very systematic, very archaic, and how are you guys dealing with that?
Yeah, look, I'll speak to that, and I think it's actually breaking down barriers to change within organisations, including the widespread resistance to digitalisation. I don't know whether anyone else read the article a couple of days ago in the Fin Review, where there was a roundtable discussion facilitated by BCG with 10 of the leading Australian CEOs, including Andy Penn from Telstra, Brad Banducci from Woolies, Matt Coven from CommBank, Peter King from Westpac. And what came out of that discussion, which really resonated with me, was one of the lasting legacies from, you know, working from home, and specifically just around the whole COVID crisis, will be a faster and more extensive digitization of Australian businesses. And I totally agree with that. And even one of the CEOs said that, you know, before this crisis occurred, his team had prepared a business case for a relatively small digitization project that involved 5 to 6 months worth of costs for about $5 to $6 million. That project was completed in a month. It was completed in the past month in the space of 10 days with a cost of $1 million. So, you know, there are some of the things that are coming out of businesses at the moment. And personally, like, we're currently just finished off a program of work or an engagement with a big client, and they squeezed us on budget and also time just over the last few weeks, and we managed to, you know, to deliver something, you know, in 2 weeks, which we thought was going to take 6 weeks. So yeah, there are some real positives that are coming out of this.
So what do you put that down to? It's like, you know, because there's a greater need, and all of a sudden we just have to do stuff, and we do what's necessary, or what is it?
Exactly. Yeah, you just do what you have to do to get it done and over the line, right? And you just
actually, yeah. Justin, I know you have got an interesting case of something similar. We were talking the other day, and you mentioned was it with Suncorp?
If I'm allowed to say that, then, then yes, it was.
Sorry,
But I didn't say
might,
yeah, so
might be the wrong, might be a different company.
could be, why not? Yeah, so it's really interesting as you listen to different people, obviously different industries, you know, to Joe's point about working in a male-dominated industry in a certain period, the work from home stigma, working in sort of IT and projects, work from home hasn't had such a stigma for some time. You know, most people who are going anywhere want to be outcomes focused. They either are outcomes focused or they certainly pretend to be. And they're enough to know that, you know, the outcomes that you set. I mean, my team never see me even when I'm in the office, right? So why would you be fixated as to where they are when you're probably not going to see them? So I think in IT and projects, there hasn't been a stigma against work from home for a while. I think the interesting thing for me, though, is at the moment, I think we're looking at work from home and we're asking people, do you think you're as productive or more productive or less? But I'm not quite sure it's the long-term analogy we need to look for. I think if everyone's in the office and one person's from home, the question should be, does that one person from home, on the day that they're at home, feel like they can contribute and those that are in the office? The difference we have now is everyone's going, this is working. The difference is everyone's at home. So everyone has the same quarter of a screen or the same 1/16th of a screen in Zoom. So everyone's equal, whether they're all in the office or everyone's equal if they're at home on a screen. I think the challenge we have is when some people are in the office, and generally it's 80% in the office and a smaller percentage out. How do those people who aren't in the room contribute and pick up on the body language and be heard on the video and remember they're on mute and someone's late to the meeting? Right now, it's been a great equalizer. We're all working from home, but I think unless we're saying we're all going to stay working from home, I think the real challenge for organizations is when we go back, how do we maintain the productivity gains from either everyone being in the office, which we're used to, or everyone being at home and dialed in equally, which we're seeing now can work. I think the real bridge to gap is when you have a multi-environment, half the people in the room, half not. And for the bank that we work at, because it's Sydney and Brisbane split, we've had that struggle for some time. How do those that aren't in the majority equally contribute? I think that's a challenge that'll be different to what we're seeing now because we're all in the same boat now. We all share the screen equally, so to speak.
Yeah, because that's you know, like especially from a business perspective, it's like, you know, you've got all these different people and hoping that they are delivering value to the business in some way. And it's becoming a little bit trickier to measure now that nobody's there. So you, yeah, I mean, is that one of the,
I'm not sure, though, Jace. Depending on the industry, I'm now thinking banking project a lot. So if you're a manager and you need to physically see the day in day out, I think you've got a problem to begin with. But if you've set objectives based on, I think if we get this outcome, we can consider ourselves successful. Whether it's, I don't know, how quickly you answer the calls is how you measure success on a service desk, or whether it's a survey of customer satisfaction, or whether it's you do a project by a certain date. I think you set those with a healthy balance of realism and durability. I don't see how that's changed.
well,
Right?
I think that is a very good point because the you know, it's how do we measure success, right?
Yeah.
You know, so is it outcome driven of like, you know, are we reaching our objectives and getting results? And or are we just, you know, measuring time? And you know, especially in professional services, which is very like, the more time you bill, the more valuable it is. It's not necessarily about actually delivering outcomes. So it might actually, and then yeah.
I've got someone randomly at my door, as luck would have it.
Oh, let's.
So
Yeah.
This is what happens when you're working from home, Justin.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Is it the pizza delivery man? Can I just pick up on a point, actually, Jason?
Yeah, please, Ray.
That was just shared there was like 3 weeks ago. Every conversation I was having with an organization and a client was around what we're going to do. Like people were in this like they were in a panic mode and they were like listening and learning. And then in the last week, and I don't know if other people, I'd love to hear what other people are saying, but picking up on what Justin was saying, this last week, everybody's talking about, so what happens when we come out of this? It's almost like people have skipped the middle part. So people talked about what happens when we go into this situation. They were frightened and freaked out, and now they've just totally gone into, and what happens? How do we deal with it once we've come out of this situation? And the bit in the middle of actually now we're in this. There's a sense of acceptance going on. Like this is reality for right now, and I don't know if anybody else has talked about it. I've talked about it about 4 times today about the similarity with, like the bereavement curve and the transition curve, and people have gone through that sense of denial and now they're in the little dip and the
Tell us
acceptance.
about that.
So it comes from, and I'm sure Nikki knows about this, and Joe will definitely know about this. So this comes from originally the Kubler-Ross transition curve, where originally the research was about how people would deal with people going through terminal diseases. And they noticed there were 7 stages of transition, and this has been applied. Originally, it was actually meant to deal with, it was meant to support people going through that stage of dealing with terminal illness and then with bereavement. And then it moved into the leadership and management and organizational world, because the actual curve can be applied to any form of change. And so I don't know if anybody else noticed, but like 2 weeks ago, I would go out for my coffee because it's still legal to be able to do that. And I would walk up the street and go out for a coffee, and everybody would be on the street, and people would be like quite chipper. Like strangers were talking to me, like, and their voices were really like, everybody was enthusiastic. It was really lifted. Like everybody was like engaging in conversation. And then in the last week, it's almost they've gone through this denial phase, because at the beginning, when you go through the shock period, it's like it's not going to happen to me. So I don't know if everybody recognised that whole embracing of community, and everybody got involved and everybody was trying to support other people. So anybody going through the hard times, everybody was reaching out and everybody was getting involved. And then as you go through this realization of actually this situation, this pandemic, and this entire potential global crisis might actually impact me, it might impact my family. So instead of looking outwards, what I've seen, and this is purely my anecdotal experience because I'm locked in a room, is what I've seen is people's view has now become, actually, how am I going to be affected? And actually, how is this impacting the people really close to me? And when I went out for a coffee this morning, because I'm still allowed to go out for coffee, I'm actually noticing that people are walking a bit with their shoulders drooped. People are not looking up and smiling at people. People are a bit more. Actually, this. Am I allowed to swear on this, Jason?
Oh, shit, yeah.
I can. Okay, great. People are like, this shit is actually impacting me right now. And normally at this time of year, when you've got this long weekend of Easter, like this is the time where most people go, right, Christmas holidays were like way gone. We've got this long Easter break. This is amazing. Like we'll reconnect with our families. The kids are going to have stuff to do. We're going to do Easter egg hunts. We're going to connect with all of the community. And all of a sudden, this has been taken away. And people, I think, what I'm seeing is this really sense of actually what what is actually happening to me, and where is my future? What's going to happen actually after Monday? Like what's going to happen next week? And how do I survive today? And this has happened really quickly. And the conversation in the business world that I've heard, and I think David, like I resonated a lot with what you were talking about, because I know some people actually at KPMG that got made redundant last week, and some of the managers that had to, let some people go, and people have got 20% pay cuts, and it's just a massive situation. And I think this realization of actually what's happening has suddenly hit people, and it's how do we help people go through that? Because 3 weeks ago, when people were talking about mental health and well-being, like people weren't in the right headspace to hear about that. Now's the right time for people to hear about that. Now's the time where reaching out to people, checking in with people, going, are you actually okay? Now's the time to do that. And it's really, yeah, I'm finding this, yeah, now's that time. And I just, yeah, reach out to people, go, actually, if you have an opportunity to reach out to somebody you've not thought about, or you've thought about but you've not reached out to them, now's the time to do that.
Yeah. It's this unique scenario where everybody's vulnerable, where it's like everybody's kind of like in this position where, you know, everyone's kind of dealing with the same thing. What are your kind of thoughts around all of that, Joe, in terms of people's experience of, you know, to kind of do things very differently?
Yeah, I've noticed the similar type of behaviour. I saw people being pleased to be able to be a part of the local community, work from home. And now people are, there's a lot more fear as you walk past people in the street. So I think people are feeling a lot more disconnected, particularly at a time of year where we would not ordinarily be socialising a lot. I think that view of looking to the future around, well, what will it be? How do we come out of this? I think that's a coping mechanism for a lot of people to sit there and say, right now, the idea of this being the permanent nature of my life, I can't fathom that, and I don't want to fathom that. So I'm going to adopt a hopeful, optimistic, we have to come out of this at some stage. And particularly from an organisational standpoint, I think it's really important that leadership teams start to think about that now. And to Rachel's point, we have to absolutely make sure that people are supported and they're managing the current state. But our roles as leaders is definitely to look forward to the future. And we've fundamentally changed things. People's expectations around how they're going to work has fundamentally changed because we've said to them, you're not allowed in the office. You can be as productive, if not more productive, from home. So we cannot pull that back from them. And we really need to start to think about what will that new state look like. One, so that we can be ready and organised and transition back smoothly, but also two, so that we can then help our people to cope with the current state, knowing that there is that future to look forward to as well. And not only is it an idealised future, but there's a really clear path where people know what to expect and they know what they can do at some stage in the future as well, which sort of goes back to that sense of empowerment and autonomy. People will feel more comfortable if they know that they can be making a choice that influences their own environment in some way, shape or form.
Yeah. That's interesting. I mean, it's made me think of something. So I'll just can I just throw a question out there to everyone. So what was there anything wrong with you know, the kind of old way anyway? So was there anything kind of wrong with not working from home?
Loads. I think it was like what David was describing to me, the ability for people to just completely deliver something that they were seeking, $5 million over 6 months to do, and they could do it within the space of 10 days. That to me shows the old way of working was fundamentally flawed in some ways. People were just taking the time and waiting and putting too much time and energy into planning and seeking permission rather than actually taking accountability and driving what needs to be done. And we wasted so much time in the office.
There's like, everyone's kind of sharing the same kind of experiences around, there's a lot of time wasted in the office, in meetings, in unnecessary coffees, in it's ridiculous. And then, for me, I've found that the days are just so much longer. I don't know whether it's because I'm not commuting or anything, but there just seems to be so much more time in the day. But I'm in more I'm speaking to more people than I ever have before. And it's, I'm not very good at that. I can just kind of, which has been really good for me. But yeah, like, has anybody else kind of found that kind of what's different in that, like whether it be productivity or
I'm finding the days shorter, to be honest.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and more condensed. I just find, like, I don't know, maybe because I'm in so many meetings and I'm really, really busy, which is a really good thing in this environment. But I'm finding I don't have enough hours in the day at the moment to actually do what I what I need to do. And maybe it's because I don't know, like, the reason for this, actually, and I've been thinking about it. And it's possibly because maybe in the office, if I was in the office, someone could come to me and just tap me on the shoulder, and we could have like a 2-minute discussion and get to an outcome or a decision. Where now someone's putting 30 minutes in my calendar, and I feel like, I'm talking like 10 minutes about how people are feeling, whether they're okay, and then we're actually getting to the actual point of the conversation, and then 30 minutes have passed, and something that would have normally taken 2 minutes has taken 30 minutes. So I'm getting a lot of that, which is taking a lot of time in my day, which is maybe why things are actually, or my days are feeling a lot longer, because things that maybe would have taken a shorter period of time are actually taking longer in terms of meetings. But engagements, to my point before, because we're getting squeezed by clients, you're just having to deliver something in a really short period of time, and working through, like, how you're going to do that. And so there's two sides of things. It's like their internal communications that are taking a lot longer to get to a decision, but there's also your client engagements where you're being squeezed on budget and time, and you're just working out ways that you can actually do those quicker as well. Not sure what the other guys are seeing in their environment.
Yeah, Nikki?
Jason, can I throw something in? And this isn't me personally, but just looking at our kids. So we've got two of our, our family, two of them have kids of their own, and so they're working at home at the moment with small children, and that's a totally different, because I think that's one of those things that if you're on your own, sometimes productivity can skyrocket, but if you're trying to juggle a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, it's really interesting. And Ingrid made a comment that we've been keeping in touch every night. How's everything going? And she said, "Oh, pretty good day, but my co-workers trashed the house."
Yeah,
and I think that, and it's really showing up too. I think people are. So she's at one of the opposition companies, Dave, and she, but they're really starting to. The teams are understanding each other better, because they're seeing that, she has always been juggling, working with 2 little boys, whereas some people don't have that. And so I think there's increasing empathy showing up as well. But it's challenging when you're trying to literally parent and work in a very small space.
Yeah, I wouldn't know. But does anybody? I've seen videos and spoken to people with kids, and I can't imagine how that would work.
If I can, Jason, I look at my direct leadership team on the project that I work on. Forget the broader company, and it's spot on. I'm speaking to, actually things are more relaxed. If I walk the dog in the morning, I have my first. But actually, if I look at even just my direct leadership team of about 4 or 5 people, there's a newborn baby, there's a mother of 4, there's absolutely, and the ones with kids. I like it. I think it brings a bit of beautiful chaos to the mornings, but I can turn it off by reaching over the day. And actually, one of the ladies who's a fantastic leader in our team, she's probably the person that stepped up and led the business and the change aspects, both in our organisation and for our clients. Really impressive lady. But I look at what she does, and actually it's really interesting. In the afternoon, she's out by the pool sometimes with a glass of wine, sometimes not. And you can tell that their days are, they move to where there's little pockets and dens, whereas I don't have that, right? I have a wife to navigate around, but I think the kid influence, you're right. When I speak, I'm speaking individually from my perspective, but I think kids seem to be the great variable in whether a long-term work from home would be desirable. And I think there's a difference between working all day and working from home once or twice a week. I think they're very different propositions.
There is a big difference between that, actually. Yeah. Anybody else kind of share around that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, right.
It's quite interesting because my next door neighbour works in the health sector, and so her work, she's actually a regional nurse for midwives, and her work, actually, most of the nurses now have been sort of redeployed into other areas. And I was talking to her earlier, and her work, because I said, "How are you doing your work?" And she said, actually, she's been stood down this week, but as of next week, she's going to be one of the triage nurses, for the coronavirus helplines. So she's going in to be trained to be able to answer and respond to calls about coronavirus. And I said to her, "How are your colleagues dealing with this?" And she said, actually, it's one of the most challenging because she's got colleagues who have children between 2 and 5 who now can't go to childcare. They can't. The grandparents can't come to their house because they're having to be locked down at home. They're now being expected by the public sector to go and do the contact center and be responding to these calls. And the nurses, as a profession, that's exactly what they want to be doing. They want to go out and help people and answer the calls and triage and help people who are trying to deal with the current situation. But from a personal perspective, they literally don't have anywhere for their children to go. So their challenge is actually, what do we do? Like, their usual 8 till 4 or 9 to 5 working pattern is not there anymore. So what is the situation? And they're having to navigate, and like the majority of us sitting on this call are in a really fortunate position where we've been able to cope with this situation. The corporate companies we work for have enabled us to work like this. The majority of us on this call don't have 2, 3, and 4-year-old kids at home, and my heart is bleeding for anybody who's having to deal with all of those situations that I can't even comprehend. Actually, I really can't. So, if there are people listening to this podcast, or this webinar or YouTube video, I would love people to be able to say, how are they dealing with it? And for me, I think it was something I was saying last week to leaders and managers. I was talking about the question for leaders and managers is not, what is your productivity going to be today? The question is, how are you today? What can we do to help you enable to do your job so you as a human feel fulfilled and you are still there to help your family? And I think managers and leaders have got a really different question to be asking their employees. And whether you're in the public sector or private sector, if we can enable people to think about individuals as the whole human, because the person that used to walk through the door of the office block is not the person now that's in front of the computer screen, is what is the question you need to be asking them to help themselves remain whole from a self-esteem perspective so they can deliver. Because what I find really I struggle with is that I know people will be saying, I need to deal with my children, but how do I help my boss remain happy whilst I'm coping with my children at the same time? And that for me is that is the biggest, hardest question that anybody can be asking of any human right now. And if whatever we can do, we can, in the positions we're in, we can help them and just, give something a little bit to anybody who needs that bit of help, or help organizations and leaders and managers just think a little bit differently about the question they're asking, then I think that's our duty to be able to do that. Because I'm not in a position where I'm struggling with that tension. And if I can do anything to help somebody else, then for me, that's what I would do.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's also, does anybody want to add to that?
No, I think that's a really good point, and I really relate to Rachel's comments there. I had one of my associate directors this week actually come to me and ask me on a Wednesday because his wife is in. She's a nurse and she has to go into work, and he's going to have to start looking after the kids a little bit more. And he asked me whether it's okay on a Wednesday that he's going to be online on that day, but after a particular hour, he's not going to be in front of his computer. So he'll be available to like speak on the phone, but he'll be offline. So I think as leaders and managers, and you need to compromise and take these things into consideration, and ensure that you're providing, those people that are in extraordinary circumstances the ability to manage their personal life, but also don't feel guilty that they're having to come to you to ask for those extraordinary conditions. So I think we as leaders need to be able to allow that without making them feel guilty, and ensuring that they're feeling okay with their decision.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's brilliant. I mean, I think it's one of those things where, like, if anything good has come out of this, it is about bringing, because what has happened is, like, we've got work and life that is just becoming entwined, and we might usually go to work and be it's a different world, and we become this different person, it's a different persona, and then we have our home life, and they're like super divided. And then little Jimmy, who has swimming lessons on Wednesday at 12 o'clock, Dad can't take him there because he's at work. And even, he would never consider asking his manager to take little Jimmy to swimming lessons. But now that the managers and everyone else in the team actually seeing, him at home, and they've met little Jimmy and they understand his life, there's more empathy and understanding, and they're like, oh, I just need to take little Jimmy to swimming lessons. I know it's a Wednesday at 12 o'clock, but that's like a beautiful thing from a people perspective, and very much like how to kind of bring work and life together so they kind of coexist. So it's 7:30, and then that's I mean, I don't want to like set it, but I'm super excited to talk about the future and like what this kind of this change means for we can really like deal with it. Like it's a really exciting time where there's just obviously so much uncertainty, but it's just change, and so it's like an opportunity for us to, especially as people in like leadership positions, to redesign things that are better for humanity, and that are better for people, and also better for business. Like any change is good, I think. So yeah, I'd love to open it up to the floor and just like see what people think is possible, especially even if you want to do like comparisons of the way things were and what that change might look like and what it might mean for people and for business.
I think
Justin's got a lot to add.
Well, thank you, Rachel. So I think personally it's interesting. I think what you just said before, but in amongst another point, we talk about when we go back, how will everyone deal with it? Can I still work from home? I showed you I was productive. I think the is businesses, if this goes on for 3 to 6 months, businesses won't allow, if they can't measure productivity, they'll find ways to measure productivity. And we're seeing that at the moment. There's an element of trust there. But I think the interesting thing is, well, companies want everyone to go back to the way it was. So my view at the moment, when I look out the window and look towards the city, is I just look at the dead rent and the expense of occupying the city. I remember when Optus and those guys moved out of the city and went to Ryde, people go, well, is that a smart move? They save a fortune on property, but are they going to lose talent because everyone wants to work in the city? I'm not sure whether that will hold anymore. And you start to go, if people, I mean, a lot of people will go, please God, let me back in the office. I want to go and have some time in the office. But is it 4 days a week and the odd day from home, or is it now going to be more 50-50? And actually, do I go into the office now as the exception to get that social interaction that we as humans need, rather than I have my work from home as the exception because I need to look after my child that day or because I've got a delivery that day? I think work from home is often been seen as the exception day.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
If the ratios go from, I can't say 80-20 because it look like I'm plugging, but if it goes from 9 in the office and partly at home, that exception day, I mean, usually when I get people ask me, can I work from home? I don't like the question. Work from wherever you want. But that's me, and I'm in a very specific industry. When we work in banks, some of the call center staff that are going home now have never worked from home. The offshore call centers, culturally, they're not allowed to work from home. Usually, from a risk profile perspective, no organization lets it. So they're not used to working from home. They're used to having team leaders around them. So I think there's some people who are familiar working from home, but not as often as we now are. And there's others that have never worked from home. They go in, they plug out. But I think the first question to go back to looking forward to the future would be, do companies sit there and go, you know what? We have a lot of money on dead real estate here. I mean, we've seen this trend from 10 years ago with activity-based working, which, sure, there's a lot of collaboration benefits, but often as well it's, we have 5,000 people, don't give them all a desk, cater for 3,000 and you make a property saving, right? Take that trend that we've already seen for 10 years to more of an extreme, and do people start playing with the property ratios and go, you know what? For 5,000 people, we only need a building for 2.5 because everyone will be 50-50 in and out. Part of their move. So I think we talk about, when we have to go back, I think the interesting question will be, there's definitely going to be a hell of a lot of investment to make people productive. No one's sitting there going, right off 3 months, we'll be productive in 3 months. So Teams, Microsoft Teams, Zoom, all those tools, as well as good leaders realizing that more than technology, you need empowerment, you need check-in, book 5-minute meetings instead of 30 so that you get those 2-minute chats that David mentioned before, right? Everyone books a half an hour slot. Well, where's finding now people are booking 5-minute slots, and we're encouraging them to, so you still get those interactions. So I think if you assume that we'll solve the productivity hit wherever we can, I'm not sure you can do manual labor from home. Then the interesting question for me, and I'll open it back up to the others, is, will companies even want it to go back to the old normal?
That's a great question.
Or will they say, stay where you are at least 50% of the time? And will that change? I've spoken a little bit and I want to have a sip. So
what do you guys think?
That's the first place to start, is what will companies want, not what we actually do.
That's a terrific question. What do you guys think?
Absolutely. I know that Allianz is in a transition point at the moment, moving buildings. And I dare say that their property team would be looking at all the plans that are in place. But I do know people within my industry specifically who are undertaking property moves in the next 12 months, and they're reshaping their plans now because it's the perfect opportunity to really drive some cost savings through. And also achieve some of those productivity gains by enabling people to work from home. But to my point before around being really planned and purposeful about when would we bring people into the office, I think we've still got a lot to learn around what that balance looks like. And then how do you make sure that you've got that sense of connection and collaboration that's coming through, as Justin was saying before, if you've got a mixed environment. So everyone's in exactly the same boat now, we're all coping in the same way, but how do you make sure that everyone is feeling connected regardless of half of the people being around a table and the other half dialing in?
Yeah. What do you think, Rach? I mean, what do companies want? Yeah. I mean, do you think the companies will want people to work from home?
I think there's going to be a mix, actually. So what I've heard is there are a lot of organisations that are actually having to invest in a lot of infrastructure. And so if you imagine all of the workers now who's now working from home, they're going through this challenge of how to deal and cope with working from home. Every manager previously who was really reluctant, and I'm sorry, I'm going to have to hark back to McGregor theory, X theory, Y. I don't know if anybody else on the call, Joe, you probably know about this. Nikki, you probably remember this. Like the whole theory X theory Y was around the manager's perception of, do you trust your worker to be able to do work independently, or do they need to be managed? And there's a lot of managers and leaders now forced into that position of they now have to show trust that people are going to get work done. So when it comes to the moving back into the workforce, of how do you then transition back, I think there's going to be a huge change. I don't even think, from a theory perspective, I don't think people have really conceptualized this. Like, what's the bounce back situation going to be like? So from a manager who's now got to know somebody so well, and who gets to know an individual, and people adapt their work in a way that helps, and they have to go back into the workplace. So I have a fear for the commercial spaces around the world. They might actually be empty after this, because, and there's a whole piece, and Justin, I think this is something that it's something that I've talked about with Paul Scholes quite a lot, is around the whole offshoring, onshoring piece.
Yeah.
Actually, there's a lot of businesses now who are having to onshore from a security and governance perspective.
Yeah.
And once they've put that in place, like, are they going to give that up, or are they going to actually say, do you know what? Our business is working fine. We've now got the infrastructure in place to enable people to work from home, and we've invested in this. Are they going to keep going? So I'd really like to hear from Justin how he sees it from a security and governance perspective.
That's a really good point. But yeah, Justin, go ahead. But I've got an opinion on that as well too.
I think
It was like,
Yeah. This is going to need more wine. I think there's going to be onshoring on the back of it. Would be the short answer. I think for a couple of reasons.
I agree.
I think the savings will get smaller, frankly, because I think the labour market here, I think wages will come off, right? So therefore, the first thing is the reason for going offshore is, let's face it, about price and scale. I think it won't diminish, but it will shrink. But I think the bigger thing is, I was a trader, sort of in between project management to start and obviously project management to finish. But I was a derivatives trader in London for a period, and just when the GFC hit, and straight up that, you don't need to be a trader to know that financial markets were materially impacted by the event happened, and then the risk departments that were kept in the corner at bay. Sorry, the risk department then took after the GFC, they restricted trading them, and so I think it'll happen again. Frankly, I think the risk departments will say, what were our exposures? How quickly were we to respond? And I think they'll look for, at a boring sense, more elastic infrastructure, but that's not for now. But I think the inability, the offshore centres and the inability to scale up, and the inadequate BCPs in some areas, partly invoked by ourselves saying, hey, actually, we don't want people to work from home because we're worried about information leakage, and there's, you can control the connection method from within a building, but you can't if everyone's working from home over the internet. So through no fault of offshore partners, but just the nature of the fact that we've had to relax all the risks that allows offshore to perform the functions they perform, I just can't see risk departments who already had a risk tolerance of X, they're going to grow it to 5X. I would think there'll be a level of onshoring on the back of this for certain industries. I don't need to go into which ones now. I would think that that's somewhat inevitable. I could, of course, be wrong, but I think it'd be somewhat inevitable.
I'm really
What do you
interested
think,
in what
Dave?
David said.
No, I agree with that. And look, I'll call out a specific industry, telco, and I'm very close because I worked 4 years at Telstra, and I'm doing a bit of work with them at the moment. And obviously, you're seeing in India and in other parts of Asia where they're locking down, and contact centers, and business process, offshoring. It's all being locked down. So what they're having to do is bring it back onshore finding ways in terms of cutting costs and understanding how to, operationalize that and work through that. And on the back of this, they're going to say, you know what is the actual back on shore? They're actually screaming like, we want to speak to, and look, I don't mean to be racist here, but they want to speak to people that are, close to ground and actually sound, like they're Australian or have the same, yeah, but it's actually going to impact that offshoring, and people are actually doing this now, and it's happening as we speak.
I mean, it's kind of interesting because I imagine with the this whole kind of lockdown scenario where everyone now has to be working from home and it's global, all those kind of offshore call centers where there's like thousands of people in some of these things, right? Now they're having to go home, and how they kind of, have you had much exposure to how they're managing that?
So absolutely, Jason. I think the problem you have is twofold. One, we talked about workers, which could be in any country, our country, whatever, who aren't used to working from home. From, I don't know how to set up my second monitor, do I have to connect a different way? There's an element of, it's different if you've never worked from home. If you go in, turn on the computer and go home, it's different. So there's people that aren't used to working from home. And as I said before, the offshore departments, often at our own request, hours in our risk departments, they're not allowed to, don't take pen and paper in there because for obvious reasons, right? And also, if you think about the internet connections on home internet in the Philippines or India, or choose your country, there's those things. So if you look at especially call centers, phones are diverting to home phones or mobiles I think our internet struggled, frankly, when we all went home for the first couple of weeks there. So you start.
This doesn't crash yet, to be honest.
There's a culture and familiarity of working from home and being productive in centres like call centres, where usually it's quite structured and there's a team leader and the stats are on the board and it's quite controlled. So there's the cultural aspect, presumably can be overcome, but there's also simply the infrastructure and the technological problems. Poorer internet and unstable.
Like having a computer.
Well, yeah, absolutely right. So I don't want to be specific, having seen different large enterprise clients, but lots of large clients have offshoring, and there's a difficulty of maintaining those sorts of services when there's a mass work from home.
Yeah. What is your experience? Have you had kind of much exposure to that kind of thing, Dave? Assuming you might have. Like kind of offshore call centers and how they might be kind of dealing with that transition of so many people working in a big office with very kind of structured systems and very like tight systems to working from home, which is like really loose environments.
From a what type of perspective are you talking? Like
I guess just how companies are dealing with it, like big telcos. I mean, have you? Yeah.
Are you talking about dealing with just connectivity issues and video conference? Are you talking from the technology perspective, or are you talking about operating their business and ensuring that there's business continuity?
Yeah, so like operations in terms of how to have people set up and actually work from home when they're used to coming into the city from well out of town, and they have a station, and then now they go home and they don't have that.
Yeah, I think everyone's on their own there, I guess. It's just something that you just got to get used to, and I think I made my first point. I think I said you gotta, when you're working from home, you gotta just get yourself into a routine and get the basics right at first. At a first point, which is making sure that your setup is comfy, that you got your lighting, you got your adequate like screens, that you can actually operate at home. So there's no there's no set rule that we've actually told people how to do, but what we're doing is like we've got a WhatsApp group, and we're actually giving out prizes to people who have got the best, like home office setting, right? And we're literally giving out, like prizes and vouchers to, to some of the consultants, senior cons and managers. So we're just making it, more fun to make sure that they're making an effort to ensure that they're set up correctly, right? But
yeah, that's a good way to go about it. Making it, it's like it seems like we've got to make it fun. Like life's too short, and like we're given a situation, and what do? You got to like make a choice around your experience of that. So if you can, then why not? I'm interested to have a chat about working from home again, but where in an office environment, or when you're kind of in the proximity of people, and so much communication is derived from like non-verbal, and so when everyone's working from home, how do we, that human connection that we get so much information from, and that we kind of like innately need. Like especially the people geeks here. I know Joe's one as well. What do you guys kind of think around that? And Nikki as well. You're all like.
So are you saying there's a group of people geeks on this call? Is that what you're saying?
You're a people geek. I know Joe's a people geek as well.
I'm just a data geek, not a people geek.
I say right now, like I've never met Nikki. I've never met Dave. Like Luke's not visual. I can't see him. Mike, I can't see him. But like I've never felt so connected in a webinar as I have right now. Like this is amazing.
That's nice too.
Like there's just something about this. It's the right amount of people with this smart and we just have something here right now, Jason, because of the questions you're asking and how you're hosting it, that we're not connected. Like I can't see, we're not all in person. I can't see all the body language. To your question, Jason, is about non-verbal language, and actually non-verbal language is really important. But actually, this, and do you know what I think? And Joe, I'd love to hear your thoughts about this. But I've been having this conversation about listening, and people are listening differently. And when you listen on an event like this, people are tuning in and they lean in to what you're saying. And it makes you feel more connected with the people around. That's just how I'm feeling. But maybe it's the bottle of rosé that I'm drinking. I'd be very happy to hear how everybody else feels about this situation. I might just be on my own island. Like, I'm very happy with that. But
the idea of non-verbal communication is obviously something that's very important. We're getting the sound connection coming through. We're also getting the visual connection coming through. So there's some in the room felt sense that we're missing, but that's only a part of communication. That's only part of connection. And it's more about the nature of the conversations that we're having, which is, to Rachel's point, I think we're all fundamentally having deep thinking conversations, and that is what connects people. So we can hear through each other's responses whether or not our values are aligned. It's not just that animalistic connection that we've got. It's a higher order connection where we're sitting there relating to the other person's thinking, which gives us a feeling that we're all part of that same tribe, if that makes sense. So these are the types of things that we need to harness if we're enabling people to work from home, so that it's not just about the tick the box. I'm going through the process and I'm looking at it. It's really looking at how can we make sure that we maintain deeper thinking, regardless of whether or not it's on a personal level or if it's deep thinking about how we approach our work or the type of contribution that we're making through our work.
Yeah, go Reg.
So sorry, I just need to so there's somebody who's actually tuned into this to our chat live, which is like real-time feedback, and they said we're all rubbish, and can we just like stop talking now? I'm joking. He said it was amazing. I was joking. Right. I need to put this on. So while I'm going to talk, can you still hear me?
Tell,
So while we've been
tell them they need to drink more rosé.
so while we've been talking, grown a beard. Right. So this is just for everybody. So anyway.
I didn't notice the difference.
Fuck off.
Not quite that level of swearing just yet.
Sorry. Go away. Anyway, there's a real point to this because the person was just messaging me saying, actually, the way that their company's been treating them has been amazing. So what they wanted to say is actually their company's like doing a heap of check-ins. There's a lot of support from everybody. They're doing a lot of innovation, so they're trying to engage with everybody to bring new ideas about how to pivot their business. They're twice a week. This isn't my industry, by the way. So twice a week they're doing dress ups, and they're doing theme days. So they're doing their WIP meetings that they're doing in the morning. They're work in progress, not the other type of WIP. So they're work in progress meetings. They're doing dress ups. Like they're having heaps of fun. And this person was just like, in fact, they've just sent me a picture of like a screenshot of like 30 people all doing dress ups for their WIP meetings. So it's just like somebody's connecting to everything that we're saying now is like, and that makes me feel like everything we're talking about today is connecting with people, and they're going, actually, this is great, and people just want to share more about their amazing organizations. Can I share a story very quickly?
Yeah, please go for it.
I apologize for this, but it's so it's actually a global insurance company, which is not the one that Joe works with, but it's a different one. And I was talking to one of my best friends today, and I said, "How are things going?" She said, "Actually, my company just put out a global, what they're calling a talent exchange. So they're reaching out
Talent
to
exchange.
talent exchange. So they're reaching out to everybody across the world in their organization and saying, do you have 1 or 2 hours that you can contribute to two functions that are completely overloaded at the minute in the insurance industry? So one's claims and one's operations. And I'm sure, Joe, you're hearing about this all the time, right?
Absolutely.
So they've put this out, and as long as the individual has a conversation with their line manager and gets permission to do it, they can say, yeah, I can give 1 to 5 hours a week. And they go into this and they then get an opportunity to help anybody in the world in those two functions, mainly in those two functions, to be able to help them out. And she was just like, I just feel so connected to my organization right now because I'm sitting at home. I do have spare hours because as we've talked about today, her work day is increased because she's at home not doing anything else. And she's like, I actually have free time to be able to support anybody else. And so this organization has just put this out there and people all over the world. So she said, I might be helping somebody out in the UK or the US or Europe or Asia with a claim or with a operations thing, but she has the skills to be able to do that. And I just think it's so beautiful that the organization is able to hold on to that talent and nurture it, and she as an individual is able to give back to her organization, and it's just a really special thing.
Yeah.
I wish I could do that. Anybody want to give some voluntary support to our organization?
And so so that's like a pro bono thing that they can like opt in to do.
No, it's not pro bono because it's within their organization.
No, I think it's just like transferable skills, like looking for other people across, people that may have, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds as though someone like, as a claims officer, there's a lot of different industries or, skills that can be transferable from different industries that may have been impacted that can actually do that piece of work and actually get paid for it. So what I'm hearing is, this organization is looking for, capabilities of people that have got time on their hands that can actually lean in and actually get work.
Yeah, so that's what I thought. So my brain went to, it's external where people are looking for, like an air tasker for people's skills, which is a great entrepreneurial idea. If anybody wants to spin this up, I'm very happy to do that after this call. But it's actual business. I'm just putting it out there, opportunity. But actually, this is an internal organisation that has about 65,000 employees, and they've recognised that in different functions within the organisation within insurance, there is work that's dipped, and then there's work that's spiked. So my friend,
So it's internal, is it? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think a lot of organisations that run things like customer service and operations, they're doing exactly the same thing. They've known that there is a spike because it's something that is done within Allianz as well. Not so much globally, but definitely the local operations are sharing their people. So anyone who has the ability in some way, shape or form to jump into these teams, offer maybe a day a week, or even if they've got capacity because they're working on a project that is paused, they could go into an operations team or a claims team and work for the next month or 2 months, still under exactly the same pay conditions as what they're on now. It is just literally a transference of time and effort.
Yeah.
It's absolutely beautiful because my friend, she moved into underwriting. She says she didn't want to move into underwriting, but she did for all the things. And now she's been given this opportunity to go back into claims operations, and she's absolutely thoroughly enjoying it. Nikki, you seen?
Actually, I've got a few things I'd like to add that are a bit all over the place. But following along that line, there's a friend of ours called Murray Galbraith, who was one of the people who was involved with starting Myriad. And he's created this great app called solvesquad.co. And his byline is list your skills, solve problems. So, I mean, that's a lovely example of those sorts of things. Harking back to, I really want to spend most of what I want to say around where I see around the future. But harking back onto the concept of we're not getting the same non-verbals potentially being online, I think what we are getting, and I don't know if any of you have heard of Nora Bateson and the concept of warm data, which is, all of the things that happen in the spaces between, and when we look cross-contextually, that we're actually getting a lot more context coming up in a lot of ways that people are interacting now, because they're not just, you're seeing them in the context of home and family. And so I think that's helping build that connection. And Jason, I'm not sure whether you want to keep along this line, and if so, I'll hold off till later. But I really want to talk about where I see things going in the future, and a lot of the things that a lot of you have mentioned as challenges. I actually think really there's some great things falling apart now, and I want them to keep falling apart because I think the way we've been doing business has not been working for a lot of people, and it definitely hasn't been working with the planet. And I know you and I have had these conversations at the end of weddings over a fair bit of red wine. But, I think we are still stuck in metrics of productivity and money. And I think there's a lot of what's gone analog to digital, where people are working at home. And I'm not talking about that in a tax sense, but I mean where people were connecting as beings, and now everyone's connecting digitally. That it's still business as usual. It's just shifted how the business is being done. And I'm really, one of the things I'm really excited to see is how the government stepped up with this double and new start thing, which is starting to look like it could if it works well, in my humble opinion, morph into something like a basic minimum wage that is going to give people a lot more choice. Because I think we need to be looking at totally different economic models. And I was delighted to see this morning that Amsterdam has, as a town, is looking at donor economics. Kate Rayworth's work as a way to run their town, which is looking at working within planetary guidelines. And there's, if you've seen the movie 2040, COVID to me is giving us a beautiful global tap on the back to say, change how you do business, because if you don't, your grandkids are not going to be impressed.
I just want to say, actually, Nikki, I think it's a tap on the back, not just to how we do business, but how we live our lives.
Yeah, totally.
It extends it amongst everything. Sorry, Justin, go ahead.
No, you go. Sorry, Rachel, you go.
No, it's all right, go. You've got so much more interesting.
It's okay. No, I was just going to say, it was, someone said to me yesterday, it was really interesting. If you look at the big elections in, let's say, England, Australia, the people that lost were saying, hey, let's lower incomes by a little bit and let's be a little bit more socialist. And then, no, that's too radical. And now here we are with much more radical social intervention from the parties that won than you ever would have expected from the parties that didn't. I'm not trying to go political, but it's quite funny actually. Oh, that's a bit too much. And now actually we're in radical territory anyway. So I think this point is, the model, we try and edge it one way or the other in our things, but actually it's been shattered in some ways and potentially good ways. You mentioned something before, Jason, of was there anything wrong with the old way? And of course the answer was there's a bunch wrong. But I think one of the problems is, I'm sure it's actually, I'm not one of the people that suffers individually from it, but if you're a woman with a child or a single parent who's male, and it's very restrictive to be able to fit in and be productive and rise when you need to physically be in a certain place for 70+% of your time. So I think this is, if it continues to break down the barriers now where we're all in the same boat, and whether you take Jimmy to lunch at 12 or you take your dog for a walk at 7, or whether you do something different, I think the normalization of all those things will hopefully make it easier and for talent to rise up, not people that fit the...
Definitely. I think I'd love, Joe, especially from like a talent perspective and organizations like looking to attract, because it's like a good company is essentially mostly about people, right? So how do you keep people happy? And what do people really want? And so I think one interesting effect of what we're experiencing now is that everyone's working from home, but it creates the possibility where, well, everyone kind of comes to the cities to work because that's where the jobs are. And the quality of life is pretty shitty most of the time. It's very expensive, it's small, it's like not a place to raise a family, really. And a lot of people would prefer to be living out in the country or in where it's a bit of space. Australia is bloody huge and we're like congested around these little central areas. And if organizations really embrace this way of working, which they have now, and if it continues, it creates this opportunity for us to be like the world to be more distributed, which essentially takes the load off, all the resources, all the load off the cities around water, electricity, and internet, and like all these kinds of things. And then like a greater quality of life as well. You can kind of, raise your family and they can have their, 3 miniature ponies or whatever they might want, which they...
You're getting excited. You're saying the same, Jason.
I always wanted 3 miniature ponies.
It sounds as though you put a bit of thought into this, Jason.
On the couch and talk us through what got you.
I'll take that, Jake. I'll take that, Justin. All right.
I think what you're describing is amazing for some, but I think we've got to realize that the things that people want to that level of specificity are so diverse. People are looking for more time, and that may be because they want to live in the country and they want to ride their ponies, or it may be that they want to live in an urban centre and they want to connect with people socially. So people are moving towards cities not just for work, it's also for the infrastructure, the social, the economic, everything else that's associated with living in an urban environment. A lot of people are highly attracted to that. So I think as organisations, particularly from a talent point of view, we've got to pause and actually say, what is it that you want, rather than assuming that it's a one-size-fits-all approach. And I think organisations habitually try and take the same approach for everyone because it's easy. We can systematize things. And it's the skill of a leader and an organizational system that can say, well, the true potential of you as a talented person is X. You're bringing this mindset, you're bringing this set of values, you're bringing this initiative and these strengths into the organization. This is the contribution that you want to make. This is the impact that you will have through that contribution. And here is how we, as an organization, to flex to make sure that you get to do and live your life in the way that you want to and contribute and make an impact in the time that you're engaging with us. So it will be really, we need to shift to more of an individualized approach. And the way I see things changing is it can fundamentally change the way we consider cities to be. So we're no longer requiring everyone to go into a central business district, but what do these now social hubs look like? So it'll be more of a community hub, and then how does work enable people to live within that community as well as contribute into a broader workplace as well?
Totally. Nikki, do you have any ideas around, would you add to that?
Yeah, I would, and because the concept, and I think it sits in with urban and rural, is, and harking back to when I think it was Dave was talking about looking at the real estate in Sydney CBD. That concept that we have to own things and make money out of the things that we own is part of that broken model again. And I wonder if we could have more concepts around commoning that can work, urban and rural, and you're starting to see it a little bit when people are starting to want to grow their veggie patch in the backyard if they've got it, and that can come together in ways that we can be starting to share our resources rather than thinking we have to own things. And then when there's that lack of feeling like you've got to own it and you're getting a bit more choice around your work and feeling nurtured by what you're doing, that urge to go and buy shit to feel good can fade away, because a lot of consumerism is really filling a need that isn't actually about the thing. The thing is just filling a need that part of you's not feeling like you've got meaning in your life or you're feeling fulfilled. So I think all of those things they're starting to rejig now, and I think it's really cool.
Are you buying shit to feel good, Nikki? What's your level of consumption of online buying at the moment?
By the way,
but it's a big thing, that there's a lot of consumerism that is coming from the fact that it's either keeping up with the Joneses or just it's not because we need it. And that just keeps the whole cycle going, and you've got to earn more money to buy the things that we don't need.
Sorry, Nikki, to interrupt. I just want my wife to hear that, so I'm just going to try and get her. She's been doing her bit to keep the economy going. Let me tell you. Pretend it was the first. No, I'm only kidding. But seriously, I will be calling you after this, Nikki, and putting you on speaker.
I've had to have that quiet word to my girlfriend and tell her just to just tone down on the internet buying, because I'm going to get a tap on the shoulder.
The Kardashians have enough money, right? You don't need to buy another episode. Behave yourself. Yeah.
But I guess kind of going back, it's like it's an exciting time though, isn't it? Where it's like these reached this massive time of change where the old was, it might be a bit dramatic, but it could be considered the old world to the new world. It's like things been doing things the same way for a long time, and the way we go to work, and it's a bit like Groundhog Day, and then all of a sudden things have been, the world stopped and slapped us in the face and told us that that's not working, and now we're having to look at things differently. I think as hard as it is, it's like quite an exciting thing of what we can create. What else do you guys think that is possible? Do you think it'll actually change how, I guess, taking it back to the whole kind of working side of things, and do you think it'll change how, because it's changed how people are working, do you think it'll change how people are employed? Because, and what I guess what I'm leading to there is, how does an organization make sure that, how do they know that people are working, and how do people really work collectively, separately, and collaboratively, and actually like deliver things of value when it's much harder to do? So how do you kind of align people on outcomes?
I don't. So I mean, we run projects, right? I haven't found it harder at all. We're used to using video conferencing, chat, SMS. We'll be used to using the right tools at the right time, I think. For collaboration.
How do you run your projects? Maybe that's a good thing to dig into.
So we don't. I don't think we've really massively missed a beat, right? So we're using Teams as a tool. So we're having
Sorry, what I mean is, like, how do you kind of structure your teams in order? Because I know I've just heard it in your language quite a bit that you're very outcome driven.
Yep.
And whereas that has traditionally not been the case in a lot of companies.
Yeah, so we always have been, and before we were a company, I think the people that work for us, have always been outcomes driven. We structure it based on different streams and such things. So I don't think it's been a material change for us. The bit where it gets tricky is where you intersect. When you run an IT project, you spend X% of your time, the project team self-contained building something, but of course at some point it gets to the point where your customer, which for us might be the contact center of a branch or the people who are doing finance for Woolworths, it doesn't matter whom, getting that out to them is the bit where it can get tricky, because of course you can have your own culture and your own way of communicating, but when you're dealing with people who are staff of your client, and it might be IT people, it might be finance people, or it might be a contact center, or it might be offshore, they're very different. So at some point you do have to get into the culture of the customer. But actually, from a running projects perspective, I honestly think the remote working, particularly in IT, I think there'll be a lot of companies, not just ours, that are saying, actually, yeah, you gain some things, you lose some things, but overall net, it's okay. In fact, the sponsor, and I don't mean because I'm drinking too much wine, I mean the sponsor of the project said to me, hey, let's get this done before we go in the office, and inevitably things slow down.
Interesting.
Mindset of not, oh God, I can't wait till we're allowed back in to speed this project up. The gut feel that he was resonating was, shit, let's get it done now before we go back in and everything just turns into nonsense. Right? So I think now our ability to be productive is pretty good in our space. And I don't think we've never measured productivity by, how do I know you did a good 8 hours? Because frankly, someone can sit in an office spending 8 hours on YouTube. So I think it's very, very antiquated to assume productivity is what you can see. And by the way, if you lead enough people, you physically can't see those people anyway. So I think for me, this hasn't changed any of that. We know
I agree.
We have governance, and none of those have changed. And I think the main thing as a leader is to sit there and go, hey guys, I know there's a lot going on in our world. It's checking in on a personal level, which we've talked about a lot. But the outcomes don't change, because if you change them, then you're almost assuming and giving everyone a pass that you can't be productive from home. But I think keep the outcomes measurable and the same in our industry. I don't know. I don't think it needs to change as much, right, as we think it does.
Yeah, I agree with that. We're running projects the same way that we did as if we were in the office or on a client site. We're doing daily stand-ups. The only thing is if we're, if we are on a client site, which we normally would be, we can get material and data a lot quicker if we're on the client site, where, we are waiting and like in the hands of the client, but they're very much aware of, those time considerations. And we actually stipulate that in the engagement letter that, the assumption is we get those items like in a timely manner, or else, the time and materials or whatever the price that we charge on the engagement gets moved. But yeah, other than that, our engagements are running very, very similar to what we would be like, either whether we're in the office or on a client site.
Okay, interesting. And is that because because I know, like we run tech projects as well, and it's like it's much easier to deliver to run those kinds of projects. But in a lot of instances, I mean, of course, it's always different. But I suppose now that the world will becoming more digital, because we're kind of having to be. And do you guys kind of see that as, especially the people side of this conversation? Do you guys agree with that, or how do you see the future rolling out in terms of that? Nikki, do you think that things will become more digital, and is that a good thing, or do you think that might, yeah?
From the humanistic perspective, I think regardless of whether it's digital or it's analog, I think what I'd like to see change is that people are treated as humans, whereas there's been a lot of people and it's just been transactional. And it's just what can you do? What can I get from you? What is it going to cost? So whether that's face-to-face, virtual, or however it's done, I think the humans, we need to rehumanize humans. Because I'm all for there's a whole lot of ways that we can support humanity, but I think we've lost a lot about what it means to be human in the last while, and so if this can re-energize that, and then I think there's choices now that money is a metric that helps us get things, but maybe we don't always need the money. We just need, if there's other things that we need, how can that be negotiated around time or space, or there's all sorts of other ways of looking at things. But I think if we can rehumanize the human, that would be really wonderful.
Yeah,
completely agree with that. Whether or not it's analog or digital, they're just tools, and it's how we choose to use them that'll make it either a really good thing or a really bad thing.
Whether we're consumed by it or it's an enabler.
Yeah.
And definitely.
But I do think it's actually, like, to my point earlier, and the article that was, in the Fin Review, and I encourage everyone on here to try to look it up, it is breaking down barriers to change, the widespread resistance of digitization. It's actually like making people be a lot more digital and enforcing organizations to digitize. And it's also forcing companies that are, it's a lot easier for startups and smaller companies to pivot, but, it's a lot harder for big organizations to pivot their strategy. And it's forcing these big, large organizations that have thousands and thousands of people to pivot their strategy and their organizations really, really quickly at the scale of a startup, which is really, really good to see, in my opinion. And it's, I don't know what other people are thinking, but I'm enjoying that.
I mean, Justin, one of our sons works for Headspace, and they've been trying to get a whole lot of things put onto platforms and online, and it's just been going through that whole meeting out of existence. And what they managed to do in the lead up to everyone having to work from home was amazing. And so and that's going to last, and that's really fantastic.
Yeah, it's funny, right? I think when we've all gone home, so to speak, we've said, what are the things that we do well in the office and how do we recreate them at home? Oh, we have meetings in the office and we have these tools that help us digitally meet. I'm really interested when we have to go back to the office in some way, shape or form. There'll be the same conversation. What was all those things that we did really well at home, and how do we stop not doing them, or how do we keep doing them when we go in the office? I think it was all, geez, how can we take this great office, and even if we get to 70% of what that great office was like, and now we're going, well, I think it's maybe slightly higher than 70%. I think it's actually pretty cool. I think it'd be really interesting when we go back. Two things. One, do we go back for different reasons? Is the office day where you go there for social interaction and actually we're humans and that's where we want to work today? We'll do our job and we'll work from there.
You can have a whiteboard on Microsoft Teams these days, and literally, just you don't need to be in the office. I think it's going to be like more social interaction, and
I think that's what's good about the word need, right? When you don't need to be there, then it starts to become, as we've now proven, you can be productive in the office, despite those little we talked about. And we've now proven you can be productive at home. So now work wherever you want. It's funny, actually. I've been, every single business case I've seen for the last 6 years has the great tagline of any device, anywhere. And what it means is all of us as employees should be able to use any device anywhere and do our job. That's kind of bullshit, right? Like if everyone said, hey, I'm going to work on my mobile from the poolside in Bali, you'd be like, any device anywhere means really your laptop in Sydney, right? So if we can show that you can be productive any device anywhere, and now culturally we start to go, hey, we've all proven that you can actually do some work when you're away. I mean, the example Dave gave before is you can be more productive. So you start to go, actually, the technology's kind of be there for some time, to be honest. Us accept the technology's been there for ages. Us accepting it, embracing it, and then culturally allowing it, I think, is the next step. And I think you can't have it both ways.
There have been. You can't deny though. There have been a lot of upgrades over the last few months or years. Like for example, Skype for Business. Like it's shit. But Microsoft Teams, the ability to actually, have a conversation. Look, so we're obviously aligned with Microsoft, the KPMG. So Skype for Business, the connectivity, and when you're sharing screens, you've got a lot of people online. It's really, really poor. But on Microsoft Teams, it allows you to use like a tenth of the bandwidth, and they're able to have video. Everyone's allowed to see each other and share screens and provide content, and there's zero interruption, which is like amazing. So you don't really need to be in the office to be to do meetings, to facilitate workshops, to get shit done, right?
Yeah, you can. And I think the point will still be all of us from home or all of us in the office are very, very different propositions to half at home, half in the office. Because usually, what are we all used to? Now we're all at home. We all share the screen. We're all even. Everyone's voice is fairly even. When you're in the office and there's 8 people in a room and 2 from home, or there's 8 in Sydney and 2 dialed in from Brisbane, the feedback I get is, hey, you forgot to, when you went around the room, you forgot to ask us Brisbane people or the ones dialed in, or people can listen in on the meeting, but they can't really contribute, Either the Skype quality shit or they don't feel comfortable. They go, I must have missed something. Everyone laughs in the room and they go, I must have missed something. I'll send an email. So I think when we go back in the office, I think it's 2 really interesting questions. Do we go back there by choice and not by demand? And therefore, is the choice because of human interaction? You go in the office tomorrow? Yeah. Oh, cool. I'll pop in as well. I'll see you in there. But it's not because we think we're more or less productive. It's just what we want to spend. But then how do we balance that tension of the imbalance between in the room where there's that dominance of personality and dialed in? I think we need to somehow continue to try and solve that problem.
Yeah.
Well, problem. We need to recognize it's different.
It seems like we'll start kind of wrapping up. We've got a couple of minutes left, but it seems like I just kind of heard throughout the conversation, it's very much about what we're seeing is things kind of balancing out a bit, where like you're saying, Justin, there's always this, everyone's either working in the office and then the smaller percentage of people are at home and they get, and then now it's the opposite. And so what'll happen when we go back? I mean, maybe it'll be like this kind of really beautiful balance. But I'm like really, I mean, for years now, I've been kind of really deliberating about work-life balance because I'm just super passionate about that. I don't really know why. It's more just like I feel like people, their work life and their personal life should be aligned pretty much, so they're kind of empowered. And I think this will, and what do you guys think? Like, this will really, this whole kind of thing where that work and life is really being conjoined. Do you think that will create a better work-life balance? Or do you think it will disrupt one or the other?
I'll make a quick comment, Jason. I think it will come back to the individual because, we have choice, but do we choose well? And often
not.
Yeah, and that's really interesting to just ponder, because I know working in the life coaching space, self-care is often for a lot of people the thing that's always at the bottom of the list. And it's really interesting then to start looking at, well, what beliefs do we have around what makes us of worth. And so I think there are going to be some really interesting conversational spaces to open up around that.
We've lost a bunch of people from the call. I don't know what's happened to it. Or I just can't see them.
I can see that they're still here and next to it. We think we've lost Joe.
Oh, okay. So there's so one last thing. Any like kind of last pros and cons of working from home? There's actually a survey of everyone dialed in to this. In the description, there is there's 2 polls. One for the pros of working from home and one for the cons of working from home. And we'll keep that running for a little while, and you can like make a comment and be able to like vote them up. So it'll be interesting to see what people are really valuing or finding difficult about working from home. Any kind of closing remarks from everyone, a pro and a con? Bit on the spot, but
I think the biggest pro for me, and I don't know if it's specific to my narrow thing, I'm not trying to make it broader.
Yeah.
I think people have been much more thoughtful and checking in with those that they perceive to be more susceptible to loneliness, more susceptible to isolation. There's been lots of conversations. I mean, there's been lots of conversations with checking in with those that maybe live alone, or maybe we just sense are struggling a bit more. And I think it's been a bit of a normalizer. So I think whatever clicks are there, and the people that have lunch today every day, or they have coffees together every day, I think there's been a bit of a normalization and an evening out of, I don't know if there was some sort of stats, and I don't have them, of you speak to people. There's probably people you speak to for 80% of your time, and then there's other people you speak to rarely or not at all. I think a lot of that is in balancing out, and I feel people are checking in with those that they wouldn't check in with more often, because of course it's easier to. And and I think what's the most common Q&A, right? How are you? I'm good. I think it's a perfunctory question and a default answer, and I think people generally want to know how you are, and they ask it with intent, and people answer fairly honestly. Oh, I'm struggling today, or I'm good today, or I need to take today. So I think the question is asked with intent. It's been answered with intent, and I think people are generally more connected in some strange way from this.
Yeah.
Maybe not with the people they're closest to. Your closest friends, you're probably feeling disconnected for. You lose that tactility, but probably not a word. But for those that you're not as normally connected to, I think there's been an increase in that. I think there's almost a reversion to mean, but
definitely relate to that. Yeah.
So I think the biggest pro, I think that connectivity with those that maybe are outside your natural sphere.
Yeah, I love that.
The con is the opposite, right?
Yeah, true.
You can be tactile with those closest to you, and to pop over and see your parents or your friends or whatever, and sit there and share a meal. I mean, I've had a lot of house party meals, and I've drank a lot of booze midweek on video apps, and it's kind of cool, but it's that you lose that human element with those closest to you, which is tough.
Yeah, nice. Dave?
Look, some closing remarks for me. I guess some cons is, look, I'm generally a person that likes to keep his business and work life and personal life, very separate. So I like to work, and then when I come home, I don't like to work from home very often, and this is forcing me to do that. So again, it's around me just getting into a really disciplined routine, because I'm very much a routine type of guy, where I wake up 5 a.m, I go to gym, I go to work, I leave work, I go to gym, or go for a run, and then come home, cook dinner. So for me, it's just making sure I don't get into any bad habits, and get myself into a good routine, make sure that I'm keeping myself mentally and physically healthy. So I feel like that's been a challenge. A pro, I guess, is, again, I'll come back to the ability to break down those barriers of the resistance to digitization, and big companies, the ability to really deliver on pieces of work that they think is going to take a lot longer, and actually doing really good work in a shorter period of time. And it's really refreshing that you're seeing these larger organizations being able to do this, and and the ability to be able to pivot, a lot quicker, like a startup where previously there was a lot of red tape, and it's removing all that shit and making the ability to move and make decisions a lot quicker.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, thanks, mate. Joe, last remarks, pros and cons of working from home?
For me, the cons are definitely that a lot of people are unable to switch off from work. So that complete blend for some is a real positive, but you have to be able to know when and how to switch off from work, because our minds and our whole physiology are not designed to keep running in one direction. We need to be able to pivot our thinking. We need to move our bodies differently. So that is a con, because not many people know how to do that. It's definitely a skill that we'll have to learn. For me, there are so many pros that are coming through with this, but that connectivity is something that I've experienced as well and have witnessed, and it's that that also hopefully breaking down the stigma of it's okay not to be able to cope every day. We are in really challenging times, and people are genuinely saying, I'm having a bad day today, I'm having a flat day. So I'm hoping that a lot of that stigma around mental health and mental resilience will start to break down, because we are able to actually start to share the reality of what we're thinking and feeling, and that be a part of our everyday life, so that then we can develop the resilience when things are hard, because they're meant hard.
Yeah, so becoming more okay to not be okay, and it's like more kind of normalized, which is very healthy. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. That's awesome. Nikki?
I think the best way I can articulate it is that it's still going to be fairly contextual. I've always found I've worked from home a lot, so the pros have been flexibility and choice, and I didn't have to drive 80 kilometres, and I think there'll be a lot of people in the cities who are enjoying not having to jump in cars and sit in peak hour traffic. But I think it is really contextual, because the cons, I think a lot of the cons can be around, particularly in this forced working from home space, of what's home like. Because there can be some people, they can be the challenges of juggling all the other things, but some people's home places aren't that nice either. And so I think there's some pretty awful stuff that can be going on when people are stuck at home in home situations that aren't that nice. But it's probably a bit more of a enforced thing, that one. And also maybe down the track people don't have homes that are very easy to work from.
Yeah.
We've talked about working from home today, basing it on now, but actually it's a little different. If we all say everything got unlocked and we all said, actually, this is the new normal, we're going to work from home a lot. There's cafes at the moment. You can't go and pop into a cafe and get your social interaction there. So we're measuring work from home now in the current climate against work in the office.
It's a very good point.
Actually, work from home now is already hamstrung by there's no cafes, there's no restaurants, there's no bars. There's no beaches, actually, I think, if you follow the rules. I'm sure you don't, Dave, but the rest of us follow the rules. So actually, working from home at the moment is already starting behind the eight ball, right? Working from home, you can go to cafes and go to bars and go to restaurants, and Dave can legally go to the beach. Starts to really even the equation, right? Just as you touched on that, Nikki, I was like, shit, we haven't really talked about the fact work from home now is a kind of a shitty version of it, right? There's a better version of it when the restrictions come off.
Yeah, what happens if you don't have good connectivity, in your place, if NBN's shit, right? Or what happens if you're in an abusive relationship and you want to get out of home to avoid, being in a place that is, not a place where you want to spend a lot of time in, right? So yeah, it's a really good point, and we haven't really talked about that. And it's probably, another 3 hours of conversation.
Speaking of which, let's wrap it up. I feel like it's I really share like where everyone is at. I mean, it's been a really good conversation to hear like what everyone is, the pros of how it's changing things and what it's kind of creating as being possible as people, and what it's shifting in organizations, which is really important. It's like a very amazing time in the world, I feel. What I really, I guess see as a pro, and I'm more of an optimist, I don't really have a lot of cons about it, but they definitely are there, is just people becoming more people, so all of a sudden there's not this facade, there's no separation of like going to work. We're still at work and we're people doing things, and we do, and it's created like a lot of things that come up, or empathy and thoughtfulness for other people, and more like human connection, which it kind of gets lost in noise in this materialistic world. But in the comfort of our home, we're kind of vulnerable, and none of that is there. So as kind of annoying and as uncomfortable it might be, I feel like it's a really, really great thing. So on that, thanks so much for joining the conversation, guys. It's been a lot of fun. It's been awesome, actually. It's a pretty long session. I'm busting to go to the bathroom now.
Me too.
But I'll send out an email, and be great to keep in, for everyone to keep in touch, and for everyone, listening in. Thanks for joining. It's like it's a bit of a shame because there's quite a lag between what's being streamed and what we're talking about. I would have liked to read out some of the comments, but we've recorded this, so we'll send out this out in another email, and for everybody to see. But any last remarks from anybody before we close up?
Thank you for proactively doing this, Jason. It's been really nice, just the different mix of people. I think that's great. The more we can understand each other's different spaces, it's wonderful.
Yeah, definitely. It's a great group, actually, and like very kind of very tech heavy and very people heavy, and that's always, I love kind of bringing that together. It's like and thanks, a big thanks to Luke and Mike for all of the behind the scenes work as well. I don't know if you guys want to chuck your video in and have a wave quickly.
Show your faces, guys.
Hey, Luke. Mike's isn't it? There he is. Thanks, guys. It was a good bit. Well, we'll probably do something similar next month, and but thanks so much for joining us, and have a good long weekend, and we'll be in touch soon.
Yeah, thanks for organising, Jason. Really good.
Yeah,
meet you on the panel as well.
Nice to meet everyone, and let's keep in touch. It's been really fun. Cheers.
Awesome.
Ciao.
Awesome. See you. Bye bye.